Ja, hoe is het met de televisie? Nou, uitstekend. We hebben een hele mooie televisie.
De baas over de afstandsbediening ben ik.
Het is er voor mensen die thuis zitten, die gewoon lekker kunnen ontspannen, een beetje chillen.
Ik denk dat we met twee gedachten televisie kijken. Eén, als ontspanning. En twee, ook omdat je niet iets gemist wil hebben waar morgen over gepraat wordt bij de koffieautomaat.
Iets moois bekijken en dan constateren dat je het alleen gezien hebt. Daar is weinig vreugde aan. Dat wil je delen met anderen.
Zo'n inauguratie van Barack Obama bijvoorbeeld. Dat zijn momenten die beslissend zijn voor verandering in de wereld.
Hersenloze zetprogramma's. Ja.
Daar kijken wij graag naar.
Ja, niet dat we hersenloos zijn.
Als ik televisie kijk, maar dat geldt ook voor radio luisteren bijvoorbeeld, dan zoeken andere mensen dingen voor je uit en dan kun je door verrast worden. Dat zijn totaal onverwachte dingen.
Ik hou wel van televisie waar je karakter van opgebouwd wordt of waar je iets leert.
Er zijn al heel wat jaren heel veel mensen die op een of andere manier verwachten dat het tv-kijken zich gaat verplaatsen naar de computer.
Ik denk dat televisie een gouden toekomst heeft, omdat die kijkervaring in de huiskamer steeds mooier en beter wordt in de komende jaren.
En zo direct gaat dat grote scherm in de huiskamer er nog steeds zijn. Het zal er altijd zijn. Maar het zal heel veel meer gaan doen. En mensen zullen steeds persoonlijker worden in wat ze daarop gaan zien.
Het is het venster op de wereld en alles is daar te halen. En dat maakt de kracht van televisie.
Fijn dat u er weer bent, dat u er nog bent. We gaan even naar wat binnengekomen tweets. Wat heb je geselecteerd?
Nou, ik zag een grappige opmerking en dat was: zou Arnie nog leven op het second screen?
Okay.
Ik denk, die deel ik even. En verder is er het begin van de middag ook nog een vraag binnengekomen of de merken in de zaal tevreden zijn over hun tv-spots. Dat is wel misschien leuk om even te peilen.
Over door hen zelf gemaakte spots?
Ja.
Of in wat voor zin tevreden?
Daar ga ik vanuit dat dat bedoeld wordt, inderdaad.
Okay. Is er iemand die op die vraag een antwoord kan geven of durft te geven? Hoe tevreden bent u daarover? Of zegt u, nou, ook even liever voor mijzelf. Kan ik me iets bij voorstellen? Doe er nog eens een.
Dus even kijken. Het valt mij even op dat er niet zo heel veel na de pauze nog binnen is gekomen.
Nou, dan houden we je gewoon even stand-by en we
goed.
spreken elkaar straks nader.
Ja, dat lijkt me goed.
About why television is dominant and will stay dominant, David Brennan.
No, we're going back. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'm delighted to be here in Amsterdam, one of my favourite cities. And I'm particularly delighted to be here today because this is part of a very big year for me. Not least because just a few months ago, I published my first ever book. It's called Connected Television. And like all good books, it tells a story. And like all good stories, this one contains a hero that goes through great adversity, reaches a near-death experience, and then finds redemption and rises to become stronger than ever before. And that hero is television. Before I actually tell the story, though, I just want to tell you 3 things about me, because I think they're kind of really important in terms of why and how I've put this story together. The first of those is I'm very much a child of the television age. I was actually born within a few days of commercial television launching in my part of the UK, and it's been a big part of my life ever since. I appreciate that makes me a media native rather than a digital native, but as I hope to show, I think that actually gives me a better perspective of where all media are leading to. Second thing is, I initially went to university to study economics. And after just 3 days, I begged them to let me change my degree course to psychology. The reason for that is that I found the world of economics to be a very dry, formulaic, data-driven, rational, and quite a cold subject. A bit like these guys here, I sometimes think. I was much more interested in people, in messy, emotional, unpredictable, complicated, sophisticated sometimes, people. And that has actually governed my career ever since. All of my media career has been about looking at people and what they do and why they do it. And that led to a career for me in media research and marketing. I worked for many, many companies in both the UK and overseas, but most recently, I spent 5 years from the very formation of the UK's version of Spot, Thinkbox. And working at Thinkbox actually gave me the opportunity to really put the evidence together to tell this story, because our role was not about the promotion of Thinkbox. We were aiming to turn around TV's fortunes at a time when people were pronouncing it dead. And we did that not just by preaching from the stage or from the page. We did that by genuinely trying to help advertisers get the best out of television. And my role, which was to assemble the research, I think was a big part of that. And consequently, I was given the freedom to collect the evidence using all of the latest cutting-edge research techniques and psychological insights into just why people do what they do. And that's very much the basis for much that I've written in my book. So, it's a 3-part story, and the first part is about the death of TV. Why could something that is so central to our culture and such a big part of people's lives have been written off so easily? Now, I know I was actually asked to keep this bit brief because Michelle from Spot did mention to me, he said, we all know TV isn't dead anymore. And I think to a large extent he's right. But I spoke at IBC last week, 50,000 technologists, and you try telling them that TV's dead no more. They won't agree with you. So we'll just look at why that narrative was allowed to take hold, but also then go on to look at what has actually sustained TV. Because every single piece of technology that was meant to kill it is now mainstream. And as previous speakers have shown us, especially Paul and Marieka from Deloitte, TV is in stronger shape than ever. But finally, and probably the most important question, what does this mean for TV's future? Where is TV going? And quite honestly, all 3 of those questions need to be answered, not from the perspective of what the technology can do, which has been the focus so much for so long, but more about what people want to do with it. And I think if we'd focused more on people and understood more about people, we wouldn't have been seeing the death of TV, which has been predicted now for nigh on 20 years, 2 decades. And indeed, we wouldn't have seen book after book coming out talking about life after television, the death of broadcast, the death of advertising, which in turn affected the media and marketing trade press, who were throwing these headlines out on a daily basis. This one, for example, which was in one of the UK's quality newspapers the day I joined Thinkbox. And at first, I thought, what have I done? I've just come to promote television, and even The Independent is telling us it's over. And then I read the article, and it talks about a new competitor to the dusty old box in the corner of the room. And that competitor was mobile TV. Now, I don't know about you guys, I can't think of anything less competitive and anything more complementary to the television set than mobile TV. But that wasn't the narrative. The narrative was death. And it confused me because in my role, I was just seeing statistics coming in all the time, showing every single year television viewing reaching record levels, not just to the programs, but to the commercials as well, despite PVR penetration reaching more now than half the population. I was seeing unparalleled response to TV content, both programs and advertising, not least because the means of response is now just a fingertip away, and in many cases, in people's hands. And I was seeing, because of those reasons, TV advertising being proven to be more effective and paying more back into the bottom line than it's ever done in its 60-year history. So how could TV be dead? The reason, I think, is during those years, we were dazzled by digital. And I don't want to denigrate or demean the incredible changes that have happened as a result of digital technology, but we just got swamped with so many numbers, so many analytics, so many new concepts to absorb and understand and compare. So many numbers, but so little context. And this, I believe, led to what I call the simplicity of digital thinking. And the simplicity of digital thinking works like this. Surely, those thousands of digital startups must be taking their crumbs from somebody's table, mustn't they? Those millions of views on YouTube have to be coming from somebody else's viewing time, haven't they? And those Google billions must be being taken from somebody else's profit line, mustn't they? And that leads to this, what I call binary thinking. Good versus bad, new versus old, winners and losers, dead or alive. And it's all based on replacement theory. This is more efficient and more effective than that, therefore this will replace that. Well, I'm a much greater believer in, and I think we've seen more of, what I call the beauty of analog thinking, which is based much more on what I call this ecosystem theory, where new entrants work within the traditional landscape. They add value, otherwise consumers wouldn't take them up. But actually, like an organism, it grows the overall cake, rather than simply replacing what's gone before. And therefore, the whole continues to become very much greater than the sum of the parts. So that's the background. That's why I think this happened. But the big question is, what has sustained TV? Because all of these technologies, wireless broadband, 3G mobile, on-demand TV, social media, and so on and so on and so on, were all predicted at some point to bring about the death of TV. We now know better, but what just sustained TV whilst all this disruption, supposedly, was taking place? And the answer to that can be found in some other trends that have been emerging whilst we've been dazzled by digital. Not least, what we've learned about how the human brain operates. Because there's been a revolution in areas like neuroscience and psychology, which has really helped us to understand why people do what they do and why and how they make the decisions that they make. And one thing we've learned is this idea we had that we were rational, conscious, logical human beings. Completely wrong. As a number of great thinkers, from Malcolm Gladwell to Nobel-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman, have now proven, we are absolutely dominated by the power of emotion and the implicit subconscious mind. And yet, as a marketing industry, we still focus on the conscious, rational mind, which isn't the Oval Office taking executive decisions on our behalf. It's actually more like the press office, issuing explanations for the decisions that our emotional mind has already taken. And if I want the truth, I don't go to the press office. What's this got to do with television, you may ask? Well, the two parts of the human brain that light up the most when people are watching television, and light up more for television than for any other media experience, are the amygdala, which governs our emotions, and the hippocampus, which governs our long-term implicit memory. Emotions and memory, that's where brands live. And that's also the fundamental driver of brands, markets, even whole economies. And that's because that's what's going on in our brains, particularly through those different media experiences. There's also been another trend. I actually was quite mean about economics earlier, and I still feel that about classical economics. But since then, we've now seen the emergence of classical economics, smarter little brother, behavioral economics. And again, a whole range of books have come out teaching us that actually we need to understand better how these economic and purchase decisions are taken. And what behavioral economics particularly focuses on is the importance of context. No two experiences are the same. No two humans will do exactly the same thing in two different contexts. And indeed, everything we do, everything we perceive, and everything we decide to do is absolutely swamped by the context surrounding it. Now, I just want you to think about that for a moment, based on the context of our media experiences. Most TV viewing occurs at the end of the working day or the end of the working week, when we're in our own home, in comfortable surroundings, in the most comfortable room in the house, surrounded by the people we love and live with, and we're in a relaxed, receptive, and playful mood. During those hours, TV takes about 75 to 80% of our total media time. And it's a really powerful context to get emotions and get ideas and get that implicit mind working. Compare that to the context within which most other media are more likely to be consumed. When we're on our way to work, commuting, rushing between meetings, dropping the kids off at school, going out for a quick shop, or grabbing a quick lunch at our workstations. They are all important media moments, but they work in a very different way to the context of television. And we should be seeing them as working together rather than one being the replacement for the other. I should also talk about the on-screen context, because what behavioral economics has also taught us about is what you're surrounded by provides a judgment of you. And again, on television, those TV commercials are surrounded by quality content that people talk about. And we now know more than we ever knew before just how influential that is in persuading customers that you are a quality brand and your content is also of the highest possible quality. So those are the things I think that has driven TV's resilience. Not technology, but the human condition. And in the book I talk about 4 particular analog qualities, I call them, real-world qualities that TV possesses that have actually strengthened it and protected it from all of this disruption. And they are engagement, and what we really mean by that, the power of storytelling, our desire to share, and our need for trust. And I'll just quickly take them one by one. Let's start with engagement. Engagement is probably the most overused and underdefined concept we in media and marketing talk about. Everybody talks about it, nobody understands what it is. Apart from the neuroscientists. The neuroscientists talk about engagement not as attention, not as really looking at something and critically analyzing it. Engagement is actually driven by emotion and is actually about immersion. Immersion is very different to attention. It drives the long-term memory far more effectively, and that's what TV does more than any other medium. Lots of examples in the book about how it does that. But engagement is not attention. It's not click-through rates or activity. It's how involved you are. And a big part of that immersion is actually based on something else that I think is fundamental to the human condition, and that is the importance of storytelling. I did some work on this recently for one of the big trade press magazines in the UK. And what I learned was that as a species, storytelling is at the heart of our development. It's how we learn, it's how we remember, it's how we adapt. And that's why storytelling has been the basic form of human entertainment since the Stone Ages. And it's interesting that babies under the age of 12 months understand storytelling and narrative before they've spoken their first words or walked their first step. And this is great for television because television is the ultimate storytelling medium. It's all about story. Whether we're talking about program stories that literally evolve across weeks, months, even years, right the way through to beautifully crafted 30-second stories about the brands you represent. And of course, that audience is in the mindset for storytelling. And there's a great quote, an ancient Indian proverb, that I think sums this up beautifully, which says, "Tell me a fact, and I may learn. Tell me a truth, and I may believe. But tell me a story, and it will live in my heart forever." Heart forever. Emotions, memory. That's where brands live. The third thing I want to talk about, again, it's something which is fundamental to us as a species, and that is sharing. Community. Us rather than me. And again, I think with the advent of social media, as an industry, we've become much more aware of just how far people will go to be social and to share. And the point is, again, this slightly frustrated me because we've always shared television. Most television viewing is 2 or more people in the room at the same time sharing the same content. And nothing is more viral than people being in the same physical space sharing the same content together. Now, obviously, what social media have done is enhance that, and in many cases, turbocharge it. But let's not forget, all it's doing is enhancing something that has always been there and making it visible. And here's a statistic for you. So far, I've been very careful not to throw lots of numbers at you. But here's a statistic for you. Based on TalkTrack, which monitors literally millions of brand conversations, wherever they may occur, every year, across a range of countries, do you know what percentage of our brand conversations with each other are based online? 7%. 7% of our sharing of brands comes from online. 18% comes from the telephone. And 75% comes from face-to-face conversation. If you can grab those people when those conversations are likely to occur, your brand is more likely to be part of that much more powerful sharing and social environment. And finally, I'm going to talk about trust. Because, in a sense, we've never lived in a more cynical world. Never has trust in the basic pillars of society been so low. But the more scarce a commodity is, the more people want it. And trust has a particular resonance with television. It works on two levels. The first of it is very basic and practical, and it's regulation. TV always has been, and still is, the most regulated media channel on the planet. People know that there is some regulatory body making sure people can't lie, people can't make false claims, and people are who they say they are. That engenders a level of trust you don't often get in non-regulated markets. And it's also linked to something else which is to do with trust, and that's about the reputation reflex. And the reputation reflex works like this, and indeed all brands are based on it. It works on the basis, you've got a reputation to protect. You've built that reputation up over many years. I can trust you as a brand because you're not going to want to lose that reputation. And of course, in today's environment, with the power of social media, that reputation can be gone like that. And the reason for the peacock is the greater the display, the more powerful that message, the more creative that display, the greater the reputation people think you've got. And just like the peacock creates that display to find a mate, brands that can display themselves so publicly and so creatively stand a better chance of mating with the consumer. And just to emphasize that, I'm just going to show you one short video which shows two very different examples of where this trust comes from, and in an online world, why all brands need it. Can you show the video, please?
And if it's a company advertising on the internet that I've heard of from the TV, I'm probably more likely to trust them and if I know about them already, I think.
So why do you think you trust it more if it's been on the TV?
Just because it's more likely to be a well-known brand.
Yeah, because you hear about all these sites that people just set up in, in the spare room, and they can get all your credit card details if you send them it and not give you the product. But at least if it's been on TV, that they've had to pay for advertising, and and the TV companies use the right channels with them and that sort of thing.
People are still short of cash, aren't they? Which is why people are being encouraged to get all their gold and send it through the post. How stupid have you got to be? You wouldn't even put a tenner in a birthday card these days, and yet some people are getting some of their most valuable jewellery and putting it in an envelope marked something like "Cash my gold."
At some point, their partner, the people go, why did you do that? And I said, there was an ad on the telly.
That point about Cash My Gold actually is a really, really important one. It's an online brand that gets people to send all their jewellery and all their gold. They put a value on it and send them back a cheque. Can you imagine if you just saw an online banner or whatever it was saying, send all your gold to us and we'll send you a cheque back? Can you imagine people doing that? And yet people did. That TV campaign was incredibly successful, and they've come back 3 times since. And it's interesting, when people were talking about the death of television, they failed to recognise that one of the biggest single growth sectors for TV, certainly in the UK, is online brands. Nearly any big online brand now goes on television to prove to people they've got a reputation to protect. But that's just, engagement, trust, storytelling, sharing and so on, are just a few of what I call the analog qualities which TV's always had, which has helped it to thrive in a digital world. I could have talked about serendipity or surprise. I could have talked about all sorts of things, the emotional shortcuts we take, the paradox of choice, and why actually the more choice we've got, the more we need a trusted editor, like a TV channel, to help us through that choice. Now the problem is For a lot of people, these seem like very soft, very fluffy concepts. This is a hard business, and we really need to talk about money. So the question is, how does all this translate into financial performance? And the answer is incredibly well. This all started in 2007 when the IPA, the Advertising Agents Association in the UK, did a meta-analysis of the 1,000+ case studies they have through the IPA Advertising Effectiveness Awards. These have been built up over nearly 30 years, and it gives an incredibly powerful insight into what works in advertising and what doesn't. The results of that analysis showed it's not persuasion or information or rational argument that sells product. It's actually emotion and fame that are the biggest drivers of sales, share, loyalty, and profitability. And what medium does emotion and fame the best? TV. Which is why TV was the most powerful driver of those performances of any other media within that analysis. Not only that, it's getting more powerful and more effective every single decade. Since then, a whole range of other meta-analyses have been conducted, all across hundreds, if not thousands, of brands, over many years' study, and all say the same thing. TV drives financial performance better than any other medium. It drives it for longer, and it's getting better. We've seen this in the resilience of the TV advertising market. The Deloitte's team earlier showed us that. But you can see there, long term, we see the rise of internet, mainly through search, the fall of print, mainly newspapers and magazines, and TV actually looks very resilient. In fact, if we look at the short term, TV has grown. So in the last 2 years, it's reached record shares of advertising. And 2012 looks like performing the same. Now, I said earlier that all of those studies show TV is the most effective media channel, and it is. But when they look at the combinations of media channels, what's the most effective combination? The answer is, time and time again, TV plus online. And that sort of provides the answer to this question, which is, where is TV going as an advertising medium? Because now we understand that online isn't eating television's audience or television's business base, but is enhancing it. We start to see things in a very different light. I'm going to refer briefly to 2 studies I commissioned when I was at ThinkBox. Well, the first of those we did with the IAB looks at the emerging relationship between TV and online, or as emerging as it was back in 2007. And then Teleporting, which we conducted 18 months ago, looks at how is this relating to connected televisions themselves. The ThinkBox IAB research actually, I think, even surprised the IAB. The way we conducted the research meant it should have had people who were really into the technology and really looking at replacements for TV. And yet, even those people back then were saying, actually, no, TV's really good, and actually I'm enjoying it more. And guess what? I can watch things on TV and do something online to make it better, to respond, to find out more, to find the content. And this was the first study globally to show the importance of second screening. I've got a clip here, but I haven't got time to show it. But that clip is the first I've ever seen where somebody goes from initial awareness of a product right the way through to purchase, and this was a games console, not just something simple and cheap, right the way through what would normally be a purchase cycle of weeks or even months within the course of a single commercial break. And that, of course, makes television a point-of-sale medium. This relationship, which came up through that research, actually showed you can literally get the purchases straight off the screen. And that's what consumers were doing before we even realized they were doing it. But online isn't just a great response channel for TV content. It's also a fantastic distribution channel. On demand is not cannibalizing broadcast viewing. It's adding to it. And it's keeping viewers loyal through series that they may not have been able to keep up with traditionally. And also through the emergence of social media, it's becoming a great promotional channel. I'll just talk about those briefly. On-demand TV, UK has got the highest levels of on-demand TV usage in the world. It's been going up at a compound rate of about 25% a year ever since the BBC launched iPlayer. And the channel brands are the first places people go to find that content. And yet, combined, it still only accounts for about 3% of all television viewing. The planner time shift accounts for about 9%, and the other 88% comes from broadcast viewing to the live schedules. And as we know, that overall cake is bigger than it's ever been. Let's just take the lady on the left there, Susan Boyle. The most unlikely celebrity we've ever seen. And yet within just a few days of her audition on Britain's Got Talent, she accumulated more than 200 million YouTube views around the world. What people don't realize is that series, Britain's Got Talent, immediately boosted its audience by 2 million, an effect which lasted for at least 3 series. And it's not just programs, advertisers as well. This is Alexander the Meerkat. He's the public face of an insurance comparison site called comparethemarket.com. And he keeps going to say, people going to his site, which is called comparethemeerkat.com, and he's trying to drive them back to the main site. Insurance comparison is the most boring product in the world. And yet he's revitalized it, not just the brand, but the overall market. Not only that, he's now got 1 million Facebook fans. What a brilliant opportunity to share and create dialogue with your potential consumers. And my favorite statistic, he had the best-selling Christmas book of 2010, beating Tony Blair, George Bush, and the Spice Girls. Go, Alexander.
David, sorry to be so impolite, but
we've got to finish.
I have to ask you to finish off in, let's say, 5 minutes.
All right, I'll finish up just by talking very quickly about now this emerging screen system that's happening in our living rooms. And what we're seeing is the TV now working with laptops, with smartphones, and increasingly tablets that are moving more towards the laptop, moving more towards the laptop's role. 5 key themes from teleporting. I'm not going to show them, other than to say the commercial contract between broadcast TV, the advertiser and the consumer is actually getting stronger because consumers feel more empowered. And I'm just going to finish by saying, I know this is happening at the moment. Retailers in the UK are working on an app that when that logo comes on the advertising for the products that they stock, if you've got the app on your smartphone, a simple wave of the smartphone in front of the screen automatically sends that product into your shopping basket. You go from initial awareness to purchase just by doing that. I think that's a really exciting time for the marketing industry. I think it makes advertising much more powerful than it ever has been. And the point is, the consumers are ready for it. The question is the advertiser. Everything I spoke about plus more is in the book. Thank you so much for listening, and sorry I went on for too long. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We do have room for just one question. What will your next book be about? In other words, what fascinates you at the moment the most?
My next book is called Digital World, Analog People. And it's about all the things that make us human that digital can't capture. I think digital is amazing. By my reckoning, it captures about somewhere between 5 and 10% of what makes us us. And if we ignore the other 95%, which includes things like emotions, like our friendship networks, how we feel, if it misses at 95%, it will never rise above a certain ceiling. That's
Thank
the
you very
book.
much.
Thank
Once
you.
again.